Do you believe that an artist who has earned hundreds of millions of dollars lives a quiet life, often wears simple t-shirts, and stays away from social media, once sold 120 of his personal guitars to raise over $21 million for environmental protection? And that is just a small part of the astonishing life of David Gilmour, the legendary musician of Pink Floyd. A man who didn't just create music that changed the world but also lived a dream life. Deep, luxurious, and not without controversies that left the public stunned. Are you ready? Let's step into the quiet yet mesmerizing world of David Gilmour, where every note is a legacy, and every decision is a statement of life. Before the stage lights called his name, before his guitar shook the hearts of millions, David Gilmour was just an ordinary boy, growing up in a modest intellectual family in Cambridge, England. Born on March 6, 1946, David was the son of a university lecturer and a primary school teacher, dedicated professionals, but not wealthy by any means. The Gilmour family was not impoverished in the absolute sense, but in a society where opportunities were not for everyone, life was far from easy for David. There were days when the dinner table only had dry bread and peanut butter. The toys his friends had, he could only admire through the shop window. Not because his parents didn't love him, but simply because they couldn't afford to give him more. David's childhood was marked by quiet solitude, spending hours by the window, watching people pass by and letting his imagination wander. One day, while visiting a neighbor's house, he stumbled upon an old guitar lying in the corner of the room. He didn't know why, but from that moment, he felt drawn to it as if destiny had called his name. That guitar, with rusted strings and a scratched neck, became his first and only friend during those lonely years. At Per's school, David was not a standout. He was an average student, uninterested in sports, with few friends. But the one thing that made his eyes light up was music. While other kids chased achievements, David quietly went against the tide. He skipped classes to practice guitar, got scolded, punished, even mocked by his peers. But none of that wavered him. He once said a simple yet profound sentence: "I don't need anyone to understand me. I just need to play." At 13, he finally managed to borrow his first guitar. With no money for lessons, David listened over and over to old records by Pete Seeger, a famous folk artist of that era, and taught himself every note. He practiced until his fingers blistered and bled, but he kept going. Every night, long after everyone had fallen asleep, he continued strumming under the dim glow of an old bedside lamp. David later shared that those days of hardship taught him to cherish every sound, every vibration of the strings. To him, each note was a fragment of memory, a flicker of light in the darkness of life. Music was the only thing that pulled me out of my darkest days, he once said, softly but sincerely. Life at the time was far from romantic. David played music on the streets just to earn a few spare coins, sometimes singing for hours only to make just enough for a piece of bread. Just as many Americans had once dreamed through the music of Elvis Presley, David started from nothing, armed with only a guitar and a big dream. In the early 1960s, David joined a small band called Joker's Wild. They played in tiny clubs and even managed to record, but only produced a mere 50 copies. Then, during a short tour in France, disaster struck. The band's entire set of equipment was stolen. With no money, no instruments, and no way forward, David had to hitchhike all the way back to London. In his hands, a tattered bag. In his mind, countless questions about an uncertain future. Back in London, he took any job he could to survive, hauling goods, driving, making deliveries. One of his most memorable jobs was as a personal driver for fashion designer Ossie Clark. During long drives through London's fog, he sat behind the wheel, his mind drifting to melodies and unfinished riffs. No matter how exhausted he was, he carried his guitar everywhere, not in the hope of finding an audience, but because it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And then, in the midst of those bleak days, a fateful moment arrived. David reunited with Syd Barrett, an old school friend. By then, Syd had already taken the first steps with a small band, a band that would later be known as Pink Floyd. Before fame cast its light on him, David continued to wander through Europe, playing music on the streets of France and Spain. Some nights, he slept at train stations. Some days, he lived on just a few coins. But never once did he let go of his guitar. No spotlights, no fans, just sheer determination and an unyielding love for music. From those cold, empty streets, David had no idea that fate was waiting just ahead, leading him on a journey from darkness to the brightest of lights. Just a few years ago, he was wandering the cold streets, playing music just to get by. David Gilmour could never have imagined that destiny was quietly carving out a path for him, a journey from silent, dark days to the dazzling heights of musical history. In 1967, David's life took a dramatic turn. Pink Floyd, a rising band that had fallen into crisis due to Syd Barrett's severe mental decline, called his name. At first, David was brought in only to support Syd on stage. But as Barrett spiraled further out of control, the band was forced to make a heartbreaking decision to let Syd go. And in that very moment, David Gilmour, the man who once slept on sidewalks and strummed his guitar on street corners for spare change, became the new soul of Pink Floyd. It's hard to imagine what he must have felt. Just a few years earlier, he was struggling for survival in European train stations. Now, he stood on a grand stage, a Fender Stratocaster in his hands, facing an ocean of people. Behind him, a dream that had almost faded away. David never sought the blinding spotlight, never craved the center stage. Yet, with his calm presence and deeply emotional melodies, he gradually won over audiences. Every note, every solo was his heart speaking. No need for words, just music. In 1973, Pink Floyd released The Dark Side of the Moon, not just a masterpiece of the 70s, but a milestone in global music history. With over 45 million copies sold and an unprecedented 937 weeks on the Billboard charts, it was a phenomenon unlike anything before. David's solos in Time and Comfortably Numb were described as whispers of the soul. He wasn't just playing guitar, he was telling a story, guiding listeners on an emotional journey, from loss to self-discovery, from solitude to liberation. These weren't just songs. For millions, they were therapy, the soundtracks that carried them through sleepless nights, the gentle voice that called out when life became overwhelming. In 1985, Roger Waters, the founder, creative mastermind, and original soul of Pink Floyd, officially left the band. Many believed it was the end. But David refused to let everything collapse. He chose to continue, not to prove anything, but because he knew Pink Floyd still lived in the hearts of millions, and in his own. In 1987, Pink Floyd released A Momentary Lapse of Reason, followed by The Division Bell in 1994. The world tours during this period generated over $250 million, an astonishing figure. But for David, this was more than just commercial success. It was proof that he had preserved the band's essence, something many thought had disappeared with Roger Waters. David never tried to replace anyone. He simply wanted Pink Floyd to keep breathing, Not loudly, not competitively, but with depth, subtlety, and humanity. Though an integral part of Pink Floyd, David Gilmour also made a name for himself as a solo artist. In 2006, he released On an Island, a deeply introspective, meditative album that quickly reached #1 in the UK. Here, David wasn't just playing music, he was telling his life story, reflecting on his thoughts and the peace he had found after years of upheaval. 9 years later, Rattle That Lock was released, continuing to showcase his unique musical identity, a fusion of freedom, nostalgia, and wisdom. By then, he was no longer a young dreamer but a seasoned artist who understood the value of silence after the storm. And then came a moment that left everyone breathless. In 2016, David Gilmour returned to Pompeii, the very place where he had performed with Pink Floyd in 1971, in an ancient Roman amphitheater, with no audience, only stone, sky, and music. This return, after 45 years, was the closing of a perfect circle. A legendary night, not just a performance, but a tribute to the past, to the audience, and to himself. In the mystical glow of ancient stones and the night sky, David's guitar rang out like a whisper from the past, reminding us that, sometimes, it is the darkness that gives birth to the brightest stars. Beyond the stage lights, the life of David Gilmour, elegance, artistry, and timeless passion. Beyond the stage lights, beyond the world tours and millions of albums sold, David Gilmour enjoys a life that leaves anyone in awe. But true to his style, luxurious yet understated, refined yet always infused with an artist's spirit. Every possession he owns is not just valuable, it bears his personal imprint, sophisticated and unique. Astoria, a floating music palace on the Thames. Astoria is not just a houseboat, it is the ultimate symbol of David Gilmour's opulence, a 90-foot floating masterpiece on the River Thames in Richmond. Built in 1911 for theater mogul Fred Carnot, with a deck spacious enough for a 90-piece orchestra, Astoria came into David's hands in 1986. He transformed it into a cutting-edge mobile studio, where rock music blended with the sound of the waves. The interior features rare mahogany paneling, stunning stained glass crystal windows, and a state-of-the-art sound system, ATC SCM 150 ASL speakers and a DDA AMR24 mixing console, installed to capture every note with perfection. Imagine David on the deck, a black silk shirt billowing in the breeze, a glass of Chateau Margaux 1982 in hand, strumming a gold-plated Fender Stratocaster at sunset. Astoria is a studio, a private retreat, and a living museum, the birthplace of the Division Bell and On an Island. Rumor has it that if auctioned, it would be worth $20 million, but to David, it is a priceless treasure. Medina House, a mansion reborn from the ashes of history. In Hove, East Sussex, David and Polly Sampson transformed a crumbling 19th century public bathhouse into an 8,000 square foot luxury estate. Medina House is a seamless blend of past and future, floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the sea, hand-carved antique oak, and gleaming Italian tile roofing. A private recording studio, soundproof with gold leaf, where David crafts his timeless melodies, sits beside a Bordeaux wine cellar with a dazzling Swarovski crystal bar. The herb garden is a labyrinth of Tuscan olive trees and white marble ponds, where David meditates with his acoustic guitar. The master bedroom is wrapped in deep crimson velvet, with Indian silk drapes and a volcanic stone jacuzzi on the balcony overlooking the ocean. Listed for sale in 2022 for $12 million, originally $18 million, whispers suggest that with Gilmour's artistic imprint and soul, its true worth should reach $25 million. Pink Floyd Villa, a Mediterranean paradise on Rhodes Island. On the island of Rhodes, Greece, Pink Floyd Villa was David's lavish hideaway. Spanning nearly 10,000 square meters, this pristine white Mediterranean villa was surrounded by 6 marble-clad guest houses. A 50-meter infinity pool hung over the cliffs, reflecting the deep blue Aegean Sea, beside orange groves and lavender fields, Polly's favorite. The main living room featured antique Persian rugs, Murano chandeliers, and a Santorini stone fireplace, where David composed under the moonlight. Beneath the house, an entertainment room housed a private cinema with crocodile leather seats, a 4K screen, and a surround sound system personally designed by David to recreate the Pink Floyd concert experience. A private yacht was docked nearby, ready to take the family out to sea. Sold in 2014 for over $1 million, many believe that with its sheer luxury and history, its true value was closer to $5 million, a paradise worthy of a legend. David Gilmour and his passion for cars, speed, style, and soul. David Gilmour was never the kind of rock star to flaunt flashy supercars under the paparazzi's glare. He appreciated automobiles as a true artist, quietly, tastefully, and with deep personal connection. What the public knows is only the surface of his profound love for four-wheeled masterpieces. Ferrari F40 and Daytona Spider, speed and elegance. David Gilmour is a true enthusiast of classic sports cars, but not the type to lock them away in a showroom. For him, cars are meant to be driven, felt, and enjoyed, every rev of the engine, like a powerful solo. In 1988, he and drummer Nick Mason drove the legendary Ferrari F40 from Italy to England, a supercar capable of reaching 200 miles per hour, now worth millions. Designed to be light, powerful, and minimalist, the F40 reflected David's musical style. Fewer words, more emotion. He is also rumored to own a 1969 Ferrari Daytona Spider, a stunning Italian masterpiece featured in many iconic films. Picture him cruising through the countryside, wind in his hair, the sun glinting off the Daytona's fiery red paint, like comfortably numb echoing on 4 wheels. But his passion doesn't end there. He may have once owned an Aston Martin DB5 or DB6, the iconic James Bond car, its polished chrome exterior both classic and enigmatic, perfect for an English gentleman like David. Or perhaps a Jaguar E-Type, dubbed the most beautiful car in the world by Enzo Ferrari, its sleek curves and latent power, like a guitar on wheels, sharp and seductive. As a nature lover, David may have also chosen a vintage Land Rover Defender or an early model Range Rover, rugged and raw, ideal for family trips through the Sussex Hills. And let's not forget the classic Porsche 911 Carrera, embodying freedom and precision engineering. Some fans swear they spotted him at a classic car event behind the wheel of a silver 911, though he never confirmed it. For David Gilmour, cars are not just vehicles, they are extensions of his artistic soul. Just as he plays every note with feeling, he drives with burning passion, every rev a melody, every turn a story. From the roar of the F40 to the silent beauty of the Daytona Spider, it's all music in his hands. Beyond the road, the sky is David Gilmour's private world. If cars are his passion on land, then the sky is David Gilmour's true domain. Not just a rock legend, he is also a skilled pilot with a deep love for vintage aviation. He once founded Intrepid Aviation, a company dedicated to collecting and preserving classic biplanes from World War I and II. But he didn't just display them. He personally flew these time machines across the English skies on clear days, experiencing absolute freedom, where there were no audiences, no stage lights, just him, the cockpit, and the wind. Though he later sold the company to avoid it becoming too commercial, David still kept at least one vintage aircraft for himself, a passion both elegant and extravagant, requiring time, technical expertise, and an undying love for the sky. Luxury and silence, the perfect balance in Gilmour's life. Beyond aviation, David Gilmour's daily life is the perfect fusion of opulence and tranquility. He enjoys classic English meals, roast meat, potatoes, and a pint of Guinness. But don't be mistaken. His garage holds millions of dollars worth of classic cars. His studio is equipped with the world's most advanced audio systems, and his garden features modern sculptures commissioned from top-tier artists. He and his wife, novelist Polly Sampson, often host intimate gatherings with close friends, musicians, composers, and writers, either at their countryside estate in England or in Greece. No social media flaunting, no media spectacle, yet every moment in their life exudes sophistication and effortless class. Gilmour once said, "True luxury isn't about what you show off. It's about the feeling of being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want." And clearly, he is living exactly that. A life of freedom, depth, and fulfillment, like an endless solo, needing no applause, yet leaving the world in silent admiration. From the serene fields of England to the legendary stage at Pompeii, from a floating studio on the Thames to the open skies with vintage aircraft, David Gilmour's life is not just a story of music. It is an extraordinary journey of talent, intellect, and compassion. No one can deny, David Gilmour is one of the greatest guitarists of all time. With a deeply emotional playing style that prioritizes melody over speed, he does not flaunt technical prowess, yet he can bring listeners to tears with just a single sustained note. Rolling Stone magazine ranked him 14th on its list of the 100 greatest guitarists, surpassing even Jimi Hendrix in some reader polls, not because he played faster, but because he played with his heart. He was awarded the title of CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire, in 2003, one of the highest honors in the UK. In 2008, he received the Ivor Novello Award for Lifetime Achievement, and in 1996, Pink Floyd was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a historic milestone for both the band and David himself. Beyond being a musician, David Gilmour is also a shrewd investor, embodying the essence of a wise artist. One of his most notable personal projects was Intrepid Aviation, a company dedicated to collecting and preserving vintage wartime aircraft. These biplanes were not only flown by David himself but were also leased as props for blockbuster productions such as HBO's acclaimed war series Band of Brothers. However, when the company started leaning toward commercial growth, David sold it, unwilling to let his passion be dictated by profit. Even so, he kept at least one biplane for himself, indulging in the rare and highly personal luxury of piloting these historic machines. One of the most shocking acts in the music world was David Gilmour's 2019 auction of 120 of his personal guitars. Among them was the Black Strat, the legendary guitar behind many of Pink Floyd's most iconic albums, which sold for nearly $4 million, becoming the most expensive guitar ever auctioned. In total, the auction raised $21.5 million, and David donated every single penny to charity, not keeping even a cent for himself. For David Gilmour, charity is not an obligation. It is an intrinsic part of his way of life. In 2003, he sold his historic home in Little Venice, London, for nearly £4 million and donated the entire sum to Crisis, a charity providing shelter for the homeless. He has also been a longtime supporter of Greenpeace, Amnesty International, and especially Nordhoff Robbins, an organization that uses music therapy to help children and adults with emotional or developmental challenges. For David, music is not just for performing, It is for healing. And he has lived by that principle. The $21.5 million raised from his 2019 guitar auction was given to Client Earth, an organization that uses legal action to protect the planet. It was a powerful statement, proving that Gilmour thinks not only of the present but of future generations as well. Today, though he no longer stands under the stage lights as often, David Gilmour remains an immortal icon, not just for his music, but for the way he lives, the way he gives, and the way he inspires. He once said, "When you have too much, the right thing to do is to share it with the world." And perhaps, the greatest legacy he leaves behind is not just his timeless guitar solos, but the image of an artist, living beautifully, living authentically, and living with responsibility. No piece of music is perfectly round in the grand harmony of David Gilmour's life. The low notes, sometimes tense, sometimes profoundly human, have helped paint a more vivid portrait of an artist who is both great and authentic. The conflict with Roger Waters, an irreparable fracture. The biggest scandal in David Gilmour's career did not come from the media or personal drama. It came from within Pink Floyd itself. After Roger Waters left the band in 1985, he sued David Gilmour and Nick Mason, arguing that they had no right to continue using the name Pink Floyd since, in his view, it was a soul intrinsically tied to himself. David did not respond harshly. He let the law speak. The result, the court ruled in David's favor, and Pink Floyd continued, with him at the helm. But from that moment, the crack between these two musical icons became an irreparable rupture. There seemed to be a moment of reconciliation when the band reunited at Live 8 in 2005, but by 2023, all hope had vanished. His wife, Polly Sampson, publicly called Roger Waters a Putin apologist, an anti-Semite, and a lying hypocrite. And David succinctly wrote, "Every word she said is true." One sentence, sharp, final, and heavy as a slide guitar note, closed the door on any possible reunion. For David, sometimes the truth must be spoken, even if it leaves a permanent scar. The foster son incident, a father's silent pain. In 2011, Charlie Gilmour, David's foster son, was arrested for participating in a student riot in London, where he climbed the cenotaph, a sacred war memorial of the United Kingdom. Charlie was sentenced to 16 months in prison, a major shock to the public and the Gilmour family. David made no public statements. No blame. No justifications. He simply stood by his son, silently helping Charlie navigate public scrutiny and recover from the ordeal. Charlie later issued a public apology and became a well-respected writer and poet in the UK. Once again, David chose not to react loudly. He chose love, like a true father. The Endless River, an unwilling achievement. In 2014, Pink Floyd released their final album, The Endless River, as a farewell to music. However, David later revealed that he never truly wanted to make the album and felt obligated to do so out of duty to fans and his bandmates. The album was built from unfinished recordings with Richard Wright, who had passed away, placing immense emotional pressure on David. To him, it was not so much an act of creation as it was a farewell to a friend, a closing chapter. This story reveals that even at the peak of success, David Gilmour has always wrestled between artistic responsibility and personal emotion. The Hove Mansion legal issue, a bureaucratic misstep. In 2024, David Gilmour found himself in an absurd predicament. His nearly $19 million mansion in Hove, East Sussex, which was owned through a company, had accidentally become government property. The reason? The company that owned it was dissolved without transferring the property rights back to him, causing the mansion to be automatically seized by the UK Treasury. David had to go through complex legal procedures to reclaim his own home, a situation that was almost unbelievable. It was a stark reminder that even legends are not immune to the ironies of law and bureaucracy. But none of these scandals tarnished David Gilmour's image. On the contrary, they revealed that he is not a deity. He is a man of depth, contemplation, and dignity. He does not avoid conflict, he does not hide loss, and he does not remain silent when the truth must be spoken. And that is precisely why he is respected, not just for what he has created on stage, but for how he has navigated life's low notes, with courage and with heart. What do you think of David Gilmour's journey? What moment touched you the most? A solo, a song, or a quiet act of kindness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss upcoming videos about the musical legends who have touched hearts around the world. See you on the next journey. And just as David Gilmour once played a long, quiet, yet achingly beautiful solo, some things don't need to be spoken, only felt.